and welcome to a special edition of Horseplayers Happy Hour. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel, coming to you from Saratoga Springs, actually live at the Brentwood, though that's the name of another show we have on this network. Happened to sneak over here, escape some heat, escape some showers, and get to hang out with some friends along the way. Never a bad thing. And joining me, as always, for the next hour, where we're going to be curating, commenting upon this contest over on horseplayers.com. We have a man you know from his appearances on NBC, his own eponymous podcast. He is TV's Matt Bernier. Matt, how are things?
Good, Pete. It sounds like it's been a busy day for you up at the spa, not just talking about the weather as well.
Yeah, I've been working, man. It's Duke Matisse's 50th birthday, and with all that man has done for me, when Duke says jump, I say how high. So, a friend who's going to be in from out of town says, can you accommodate him? I shifted some people around so we could get Chappie some accommodations for a few days. Looking forward to his visit a little bit later. He said that his wife, Kimberly, was interested in drinking a gin fizz cocktail on his birthday. I went on a little scavenger hunt this morning, found a plastic pitcher, got the ice so you can hear some good cocktail sounds in the background now as well from Marcus here behind the stick at the Brentwood. Anyway, we've been drinking gin fizzes over there. 10 Strike Racing, the founding partners on the In the Money Media Network. They won a race today. It's been a lot of good things happening, my man, but really looking forward to spending the next hour with you, looking ahead to great racing this weekend, looking back at the Haskell last weekend. How are things with you? How was your trip to Jersey? I'm sad I didn't get to see you down there.
Yeah, in and out. It was good. I thought the racing all around was quality. A big Saturday for Chad Brown and company. And in the big one, Brad Cox comes out on top for the second year in a row, along with Florent Giroux. This time they actually crossed the wire first. They don't have to be awarded the victory in the grade one. So I think it's an interesting race. We'll dive into it, do the whole soup to nuts in time, and then also talk about some other big races coming up this weekend as well.
I think it's a great plan. Yeah, we'll do our little gimmick where we do the opening of the late week in the Money Players podcast at the same time as we're going through Horse Players Happy Hour. How did we do today in Horse Players Happy Hour? Last week it was all kinds of dodgy weather. We got to 180. I'm hoping we hit at least that this week, but honestly, I haven't had an opportunity to look. How did we do today, Matt?
No, we're a little lean. 168, and
okay.
Perhaps it has to do with the weather. It could be a number of different things. We've had a few weeks in this 165 range. Last week we got up over 180. We've had other weeks that we got up to 200. So it feels like it's anywhere in between, give or take 10 to 15 entries. Look, it is what it is. It's the middle of summer. People are off on vacations or whatever it may be. And again, we can't control the weather, unfortunately, upstate. But all around, I think it's a good turnout. Top 16 finishers will qualify for Saturday's Bcbc qualifier on horseplayers.com. Top 10 will accumulate points toward the season-long Horse Players Happy Hour Tour. Top 2 will punch their ticket to the postseason for the Horse Player Happy Hour Tour.
Very well put, and that's the idea here. So this is a very special thing we've cooked up with our friends at the Breeders' Cup. In part, we're promoting the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge for sure, but we have this opportunity with 2 extra seats added to our tour prize pool at no extra cost to players. And you can participate in the prize pool even if you only play 1 week, if you happen to run in the top 2. And we get to reward the hardcores through the tour point system. As you said, you finish in the top 10, you accrue points, and through the tour, through your top 8 scores, can win a seat that way, as well as our man David Browning did in 2021. That's a story we're going to be following throughout 2022 through these games. And then there's also what we call the traditional route. You can play in this contest, $20, win your way into the $179 qualifier on Saturday, which of course you could also buy your way into directly and get your Bcbc seat that way. So lots of different ways to win. And you follow us here, hopefully live every Thursday from 4 to 5. We'll see. I mean, I don't know. I'm loving the all Saratoga format. I'm not sure we're going to mess with it, but I come the fall, we'll play around with the format a little bit too, I think. We originally had some ideas about how this was going to go down, but the market has been pretty robust when it comes to these all Saratoga games. So it's kind of a fun way to fly, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things that, again, the crowd will tell us what they want to do. And it seems like we've had enough folks that support this all one track philosophy, especially when we've got racing as good as we do up at Saratoga. So I don't think there's any reason to change it right now. But if for whatever reason we end up getting to a position where maybe we start to see entries dip a little bit, then we can talk about it a little bit more. It's also worth noting, this was something I was actually just reading as we came on, and I may have had a little birdie tip me off to this. The Belmont Fall Meet will not be the Belmont Fall Meet. It will be the Aqueduct Fall Meet, which is an interesting little wrinkle as renovations begin. Dave Grenning posted a story over on DRF.com about things are beginning to move in Elmont, New York, which means there won't be any racing there.
Saw that, and there had been rumors, all kinds of wacky rumors about them maybe extending the Saratoga meet. Perhaps they just took too long to get that organized. Perhaps it was a logistics thing with keeping employees up here for the fall. But it does sound like they'll be going back downstate and simply running at Aqueduct. I mean, look, they've got to renovate Belmont. I mean, you go there right now, and it is not a fully formed situation. I mean, with the arrival of the arena, and I'm a big fan of the arena, but I mean, that took a giant chunk of the backyard out of it. When you go there, even on Belmont Day, you feel like you're in a place that's just not fully formed. This needed to happen. Belmont, for better or worse, it was a situation where basically was dated on arrival, right? I mean, I think it was early 70s. The whole world of simulcasting was, coming in. It wasn't really simulcasting back then. That took another 10 years. But the whole world of off-track betting, it was built for a day where they'd get 20,000 people, on a Wednesday. And these days it's a giant airplane hangar most of the time. And it makes sense that they're going to want to renovate and change and modernize and make it something a little bit more in step with the times and with some better options for people to come and enjoy the great racing that they have there. So this is, what I would describe as growing pains, I guess. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with as far as this whole renovation project goes. And yeah, you'll be heading out to the Big A if you're going to go racing in New York this fall. I would imagine we won't see any Belmont until spring 2023. Is that what they're saying, Matt?
Yeah, that's what Dave's article sort of alludes to. And I think one of the other interesting pieces that is brought up is the potential of a synthetic track being added to Belmont Park, which I don't know why it hasn't been discussed earlier, or maybe it had been and it was all behind closed doors. I know horse players are very stingy people. They like things their way. They don't want change, this, that, and the other. I can't understand how there hasn't been a synthetic track in New York prior to this. And if they do choose to go this route, I would imagine it would be the inner turf. And if that's the case, I think it makes all the sense in the world. I know some folks don't love it, but I think Gulfstream did the right thing. If you have the ability to have 3 racing surfaces, I think you should have one of each: turf, dirt, synthetic. I think it only makes sense. And it offers the folks up north of the border at Woodbine, if you don't want to ship down to Florida, but you still want to run some horses year round, you just have to drive down to New York. I think it makes all the sense in the world. We'll find out. That's not a confirmed piece that they're going to do that, but at least it's in the article and they're kind of kicking the tires on it. I think it's, frankly, I think it's a no-brainer, but that's just my opinion.
It's very logical. It feels like it might also, though, be a precursor to not having racing at Aqueduct year round, right? I mean,
certainly, yes.
Synthetic and all weather. I mean, the idea that would be the winter racing service makes sense. I just would like to see them, and I think this will happen at Gulfstream as we go forward, have different races carded for the different tracks. It felt a little weird at Gulfstream when they had the 3 tracks, but similar races being carded. It became a little bit hard to get a line on some of the form. I mean, I'd love it if they said, for example, I'm just making it up, but sub $50,000 claiming, that's all going to be synthed, and then you run, you have a sort of a middle division of middle to top division, which is run on the turf, and then you sort of play that way, and you make the conditions a little bit like clearer, and then obviously you have the synthetic as a fallback too when you get weather and can't run on the turf. We'll see how it all plays out, but yeah, that was big news today. That came out via our man David Grenning over at the Daily Racing Forum, and something, if you're out there and you want to comment, throw some comments in. We'd love to hear what you think about this new plan for New York racing, or what's going on up at Saratoga this meet so far. What is going on? Should we do a little quick leaderboard check? We got about 15 minutes. Matt, the way I have my setup today, I might ask you to read through the leaderboard today, both for the contest and for the and also for the overall tour leaderboard, if AJ is able to put that one up. But who's doing what so far?
Well, and actually, AJ, if you can refresh that page, I think we have another result already in. I can go through. I'm going to run down. There it is. I'm going to. Nope. Are we in the same one? I'm in the wrong one. Stand by. Stand by. Stand by. Stand by. Here we go. So the top 16. Again, top 16 are going to qualify for Saturday's Bcbc qualifier. We've already laid it out. Top 10 are going to accumulate points toward the year-long Horseplayer Happy Hour Tour. Top 2 automatically qualify for the postseason. The number 1 is Stuart Guthrie at 44.80, tied with Mark Henderson. They're both about $6 clear of Dave Nichols, who's in third. Fourth is Ryan Henderson, tied for fifth, Michael Domabil and Togo Travaglia. Seventh is Ronnie Rouse at $29.10. Eighth is Frank Foss at $29, tied, but apparently based on the tiebreaker, and for those of you that are unfamiliar, tiebreakers with the same amount of points breaks down to show placing. So Frank Foss must at least have at least one more show placing compared to James Lasowski and Daniel Edwards, who are both at $29. John Nespolini is at $28.70 in 11th. Ernest Hay Jr. is in 12th. We have a tie for 13th between Robert Mack and Bruce Meyer. 15th is John Ball III. 16th is Tyler Stisk. That's going to round out the 16 at this point anyway. Looking to move on. Tyler is ahead via tiebreaker from Ray Arsenault, who won the National Horseplayers Championship a few years ago. They're at 26.20, so we got a long way to go with only 4 races left.
Yes, we're about halfway through this contest, and horseplayers.com. That's the place you want to go to participate in this. Also, loads of qualifying action all through the week for the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge and also the National Horseplayers Championship. Definitely a place that you don't want to miss, and lots of familiar names and people we've seen on the leaderboard week in, week out up there. And yeah, maybe at some point, if we have a chance, and if AJ doesn't have it at his disposal, we can skip it and catch up next week. But curious to see how we're doing on the Tour leaderboard as well. We got about 13 minutes to the 7th race at Saratoga. One funny thing about all the time between races at Saratoga is we've only had one race during the actual shows for the last couple of weeks. Matt, it's been a little bit funny in that regard.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that unfortunately we lucked out with the way Belmont was running with those Twilight Thursdays where first post was 3:05. It enabled us to get at least 2 races, and we could even start to talk about the third race as part of our hour. Now back to your standard 1:05 post time. We only really have one live race that will be going on during these contests as long as we continue on with the All Saratoga feed. But I think it enables us, and frankly, this time of year, I think it's most important than opposed to the beginning of the season when we started at Belmont. We have a number of win-in-your-in races, and not just win-in-your-in races for the Breeders' Cup over the weekend, but other major prep races for some bigger and better races down the road, whether it be the Travers or the Pacific Classic. So while we only have one live race to discuss, we have many previews of races that we can at least look ahead to coming up on Saturday that are going to be major events come World Championships time down at Keeneland at the beginning of November.
We'll absolutely dive into everything going on Saturday, from the Vanderbilt to the Bing Crosby to the San Diego. We'll do that after we get through this next race at Saratoga, race number 7, coming in 10 minutes time. We got loads of time before this, Matt, but we might as well take a quick look at it. Did you have a strong opinion in here? Anything you would have been getting real stuck into as far as this week's Horseplayers Happy Hour goes?
No, I found it to be a really difficult race, and not just because turf sprints are the bane of my existence. I actually would ask you, with the amount of rain that's fallen, it's still listed as firm. Do you think that's fair?
The 2 storms we've had today have been really quick. So I think it's the kind of thing where it's probably still firm, but it's like sort of a weird firm where you definitely have some like dew in there. But I don't think it probably merits a change in the official course designation, because neither of those little downpours, they were like 2 15-minute downpours. So I think it's probably accurate. We'll see what the times look like and how that shakes out after the fact.
So, I went through, and part of the reason I had such a hard time with this race, and I'm going to just make a little token wager because the horse's price is right, but I consult 3 or 4 different products when I go through handicapping, and I couldn't get a consistent read out of the 3 or 4 from a pace standpoint. I have one program that says Immortalization, the 2, shipping up from New Jersey, is far and away the fastest horse early. And then I have other products that I use that suggest the horse won't even make the lead. So I'm going to gamble at 10-1 that one of the pieces I use is accurate and this one can make the front. If he can't, I don't think he can win, but I'm willing to find out at 10-1. Comes up from Michelle Hemingway, comes off of an open length victory in the starter allowance down at Monmouth Park on July the 1st. 3 horses have come back out of that race. They've improved their buyer speed figured by 9 points, by 12 points, and by 15 points. So there's a part of me that believes it was a pretty solid race. Again, I'm curious. I'll ask you, what do you think of the pace situation? Can the 2 make the front?
I think so. I mean, you need an aggressive ride, but right, you look on a pace map at the other 2 runners. You've got Bustin' Shout with Kendrick Carmouche up. He can be aggressive, but coming out of that more galloping 6 furlong configuration at Belmont, it wouldn't shock me if they tried more of a stalk and pounce tactic. The runner I think is a bit interesting is number 8, Boston Tea Party, who I do not think will be on the lead on the cutback, though it's interesting that the Timeform US pace projector anyway has that horse on top. But looks like one who will really benefit from a cutback in distance, and I think should be forward anyway. But I don't hate the idea at all as a backup of Immortalization, speed of the speed type play. I mean, this horse just went gate to wire, going a flat 5 at Monmouth and looked pretty good. I mean, maybe needs to be a little bit faster, but not out of it by any stretch of the imagination as far as I'm concerned.
I also, and I don't know if you agree or disagree, and frankly, you know, I don't look at condition books. I don't know what races are and aren't written at different places, but I always look at, we see it a lot with Finger Lakes shippers, but I like when connections ship north to Saratoga. You know, this is a horse that's run down in Jersey each of the past 2 starts. And again, I don't know what the condition books down there look like. Maybe there wasn't an N1X for turf sprinters or whatever the case may be. But I feel like there's a bit of, you're not going to ship all the way north just for the sake of shipping these days with what gas costs or anything else like that. You know, I mean, if you can run in your backyard, you're going to do it. So I look at it as a positive. Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean that the horse is necessarily going to run well or win or any of that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I had a hard time. And again, I used 3 or 4 different products and I've got mixed messages from all of them, but there are enough to suggest that Immortalization could clear to the front. I'll take my chances that final half furlong won't be the thing that bites him in the rear end.
Yeah, I think 2-8's an interesting way to go here. 8-2, 2-8, and see if we can't get lucky in this 7th race at Saratoga. Looks like about 6 minutes to post there. Again, I have a little bit of an unusual setup here at the Brentwood, so I'm not able to look. This would be a great time to answer any questions if anybody out there wants to hit us up with any. And then, yeah, we'll do a little reset after the race. We'll look at that leaderboard and see where we are, and we'll talk about the Haskell from last weekend, and we'll look ahead to this week's Win and You're in action for the Breeders' Cup, the Bing Crosby Stakes. And I know, Matt, you're very excited about the San Diego as well as potential key prep for bigger stuff going forward.
Yeah, you know, the spoiler alert, we'll talk about the Saratoga races. I think they're pretty cut and dry. I mean, I don't know how crazy I would get in either of those. The Del Mar races, which include the Win and You're in Bing Crosby, I think you can put it this way. The horses that look like they are the clear-cut favorites, I think you've got cases against them, and you can try to get a little bit cute in there. Whereas the 2 races at Saratoga, it seems very much like it would take something kind of unforeseen to unfold for some of the big names in there to not fire and perform.
I tend to agree. I mean, the Jackie's Warrior especially looks like a horse that could be a legitimate 1-5 shot in this year's Vanderbilt. We'll wait and we'll get there when we get there, though, and see if we have any comments or questions from the people assembled. We'll try to do some other stuff before we get to what will eventually end up being the opening to our late week show here on the In the Money Media Network. What else? Any other interesting experiences last weekend down there at Monmouth? You know, outside of the big race, any particular performances that impressed or surprised you, Matt?
No, I mean, I thought it was pretty straightforward. I mean, the racetrack was like lightning. You know, we saw track record after track record come down, and from a turf standpoint, I look at that United Nations. We kind of touched on it. Wouldn't surprise me at all if Adamo took a big step forward. He ran well. I don't know that I'm looking at him as a Breeders' Cup turf kind of runner. Trebuven, it seemed like he just kind of hit the wall at the very end. I didn't like how late he was to change leads in deep stretch. Beyond that, I mean, Gufo kind of did what Gufo does. He comes with his run, sometimes good enough, sometimes it's not. But beyond that, I did see some chatter about highly motivated, kind of putting himself into the Breeders' Cup Classic conversation.
He's going to have to do a lot more than that, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, not to cold water that, but boy, I mean, this horse is so much slower than the horses we are talking about. We have talked about. We will continue to talk about. He's just not nearly fast enough to be. I mean, again, if I'm being brutally honest, he's not remotely competitive against some of the fastest horses that we have at a mile and a quarter, especially so. I don't think he's a mile and a quarter horse. Never have, never will. But he ran very well. Give credit where credit's due. Search results, I'd love to know what the long-term plan is, because I don't personally see her as a distaff horse. I would love them to try to turn her back to 7/8 of a mile. I know that filly and mare sprint division has all of a sudden turned into a rather competitive group, but I think she'd have as good a chance as anyone on a turn back. So maybe you prep her going long and you cut her back, but maybe, am I being unkind to think that if she runs in the distaff, I think there are some big fillies and mares out there this year.
It's tough. I mean, we saw what Clairiere did, and I think you can argue Malathot last weekend was. I could argue it either way. Nick Tamara made a good case that Clairiere, given the specifics of the trip, was better than the bare form suggested against Malathot. But I could also argue that, especially in a 4-horse race, being 3 or 4 wide around the turns, that maybe Malathot's a lot better than that, and just would be seen to better effect in a bigger field. But I mean, when you're looking at those two, those are going to be better numbers than what search results has put up to this point.
Well, and that's just those two. That's not including Nest, who has earned a 106 buyer on the heels of, we talked about that Belmont Stakes fig, and having talked to people that are in the know from a number standpoint, that Belmont figure from a buyer standpoint was actually turned down.
Yep.
It initially looked like it could be a 106 or a 107. Well, guess what? With Nest coming back and running a 106, it does make you think a little bit that maybe that Belmont was just genuinely that fast and that good, which, initially I looked at and said, there's no way it's possible. But so you've got Nest, you've got Clairiere, you've got Malathot. It sounds like She Dares the Devil's going back west to Del Mar, possibly for looking to repeat in the Clemenel Hirsch. Maybe she's not what she once was, but I thought she was fantastic in the Fleur de Lis down at Churchill Downs at the beginning of July. If she can kind of build upon that form, add her to those other three we've talked about, and then getting back to search results, I don't know. I would rather take my chance going 7/8 at Keeneland against what, from a raw talent standpoint, I think I am as good as anyone compared to the distaff at 9 furlongs, which might be pushing it a little bit for me, against what I think could be a very good group. And I haven't even mentioned Latruska yet. Right. I mean, this is a quality group of fillies and mares. And I don't know. I'll be very interested to see what Chad decides to do going forward with search results.
It's a very interesting idea to just turn her back and, try to be the boss of that division, given the abundant quality we're seeing with the older fillies and mares this year. We've got 1 minute at Saratoga here, one of the as we turn into the back half of our Horseplayers Happy Hour contest. We had talked about the 2, who you like, Matt. I mean, 11-1, a pleasing price. I was thinking the 8 was an interesting turn back. It's 7-2. What do you think about this favorite, the one runner at 5-2 in this spot?
Yeah, from a number standpoint, I understand it. I feel like whenever Al Stahl shows up, you have to respect any entrant from his barn. The thing that I was a little bit unsure of, you take a look at some of the workouts. We've got pretty healthy gaps in the workout tab. You've got a June 12th work. You don't have another one until June 30th. You don't have another one until July 15th. Off of a bit of a layoff, I am a little bit leery at a short number. Maybe there's some signal in this money that the one is taking, but I was inclined to let this one go by. Of the other runners in here, I guess Ring of Fire at 4-1 makes a bit of sense, but I don't know that you're getting I don't see a forward move coming. I think she's going to run a low 80. If it's good, or he rather, if it's good enough, it's good enough. But I don't need to find out at odds of 4-1. The 5 I thought was a little bit interesting, but is rather chilly on the board at 7-1. Legends Can't Die goes out for George Weaver. Broke the maiden on debut. They paid a boatload of cash for a son of valiant minister who stands for 5. They paid $350 back at OBS in April of last year. And the horse won solid enough first out of the box. Saez jumps off. Franco is on. Do with that what you will. I don't necessarily look at it as a downgrade. I think Manny is, right there with Luis Saez. But, I know some people get turned off by first time against winners. That to me doesn't really, is the horse good enough or not? I typically look at it that way. But beyond that, I just thought it was a really difficult race to make heads or tails of. The horse you brought up, the 8 Boston Tea Party, is, at least for me, with the 2, the key to the race. Because if the 8 is fast enough to apply pressure to the 2, I think the 2's goose is cooked. If for whatever reason on that turn back, granted, the Manila was against much better company. If the 8 decides to sit and say, we're going to have the bottom, we can go by you, that's when I think the 2 could get brave out there. But it really will boil down to how aggressive Zarek can sell and what kind of early foot does this 8 have on the turn back.
I'm interested to see how it plays out. I do think those are the 2 interesting runners, all the way up to 13-1 now on the 2. So that's certainly, why not at that point? You mentioned that idea of the first time against winners as an angle, potentially negative angle. All I'd throw in there about that is that I think I like that as a reason to sometimes look against a heavy favorite, especially when trying something they haven't done yet. First time against winners, I feel like that can sometimes be a good angle to bet against a horse. But it can honestly sometimes almost be a positive when you're looking at non-winners of 2 lifetime and things like that, where you've got proven losers who you start to worry, hey, maybe this one has a character flaw. And the first time against winners horse is clearly going to be on the upswing and sharp. So, you can argue it either way as far as that goes.
I have never been afraid to take a horse trying winners for the first time. If I think they fit, they fit. And yes, they may lack experience. They may, whatever you want to say. To your point, though, if you're taking on a group like this, who, granted, N1X types by no means are slouches. These are good horses. But there are no superstars in this race. It's why I'm drawn to immortalization, or, again, why you could make the case, I think, feasibly for the 5 taking on winners for the first time.
And they pop from the gate at Saratoga. We're going to see how it plays out with the 2 showing good speed at a very nice price. Immortalization goes out all the way to 14-1. Makes me think about how much I have been noticing how good the win pool is at Saratoga as a potential option. There's a lot of horses that are getting buried in various picks and various exactas, trifectas that are still paying good numbers in the win pool. But the scenario that you put out there, Matt, Boston Tea Party glued to immortalization, that's exactly what's happening. And it looks to me, as they turn for home, that Boston Tea Party maybe going the better of the 2, but we'll see.
I don't know about that yet.
Digging in on the inside, just as I spoke those words. And we've got
the 6 up the wood
making a run, and we've got the 1 down the center. It looks like those 2 will decide it. I think it's going to come 1-6. They might have gone faster than I thought they did here with the 1 getting the best of them. 1-6-3 at Saratoga. That was a horse we talked about, that Al Stoll horse that caught all the money. And you said, hey, maybe we want to suspect that. You don't often see, as good as David Aragona is at making a morning line, an 8-1 morning line going off at 2-1. That could be a proxy for inside info of sorts. And Evan Singh just blew them away there in that race at Saratoga.
Yeah, and again, we talked about the idea that there could potentially be a little bit of signal in some of that money. If we're calling a spade on paper, this horse isn't 2-1. I mean, David's numbers are typically spot on. On paper, this horse is not a 33% chance winner. It's just not.
No.
So, do with that what you will. And again, I brought up the gaps in the workout tab. The horse had only sprinted 1 time. Granted, it was a victory in the first career start, but the horse won. The horse won like a 4-5 shot. Never mind a 2-1 shot. So, do with that what you will. But good effort from this one. I thought Steve Christ's horse made a good move up the inside beneath Johnny V. And then there's a photo there for fourth with, the pace setter, the 2, and I think maybe the 7 was involved. But hey, full marks to the winner at 2-1.
Stephen Crest, owner of Thin White Duke, with the great David Bowie inspired name. Going to be hearing, hopefully, I haven't reached out to him about this, but hopefully he'll say yes, going to holler at Stephen and see if he wants to come and join us for our Whitney Day show next week. Hopefully we'll get him and JK on there. But yeah, he's got to be happy with that second there at Saratoga. 1-6-3 in the 7th at Saratoga. And I think, Matt, if you're game, we'll do a little reset and we'll look back and look forward as far as all these Breeders' Cup doings go.
Let's do it.
Hello and welcome to the Late Week in the Money Players podcast, which is also in the middle of our Horseplayers Happy Hour. Want to encourage everybody listening to participate in Horseplayers Happy Hour every week. An amazing deal for players. We've got this tour. You only have to play 1 week to be eligible to participate in the prize pool. We've got $20,000 added as far as that goes. All you got to do, go to horseplayers.com, put up $20 and play Horseplayers Happy Hour every week on Thursday. And best of all, the rake goes to Thoroughbred Aftercare, our friends at Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, and also the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel, coming to you live at the Brentwood this Sunday, as I will be every Sunday for the rest of the week, and joined by TV's Matt Bernier. Matt, how are things?
All good, Pete. Looking forward to chopping up this weekend's racing. We've got a win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup Sprint out at Del Mar. We've got a Grade 1 Sprint at Saratoga. We've got a 3-year-old prep. We've got a Pacific Classic prep. You name it. I feel like we've got all bases covered.
Let's look back before we look forwards. We had the Grade 1 Haskell last weekend, win and you're in action for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Many thought of it as a match between Jack Christopher and Taba, but it was Cyberknife who got the spoils, making that big run in the lane and getting the money. What did you think of this performance?
Yeah, I mean, he was, when you watch the race, he was traveling the best at every point. It was a matter of, would Florent Geroux find any kind of a seam for him to run through? In fact, at the top of the lane, he's able to shoot down on the inside. He kicks on and just holds off Taba, who's closing with a flurry. I thought it was a really encouraging effort from Cyberknife, a horse that, I got to interview Brad Cox right after the race, and he still alluded to the fact that the horse mentally is still a bit of a work in progress, but he continues to improve from a speed figure standpoint. And I love that he's willing to run in behind horses, which is something Taba is not willing to do at this point in his career, which is a big red flag with a horse like that, where the talent is off the charts. But the 2 times he's been in behind horses, the Kentucky Derby, which was a non-effort, and then on Saturday or last Saturday in the Haskell, and until Mike Smith got him out into the clear, he looked like he was going to run fourth. He was just paddling along. He gets into the clear and he finishes with a flurry. So there's a part of me that looks at it and says, Taba, until he irons those things out, yes, he is certainly fast enough to be competitive, but he's got a long way to go. Cyberknife, yes, mentally still needs to continue to improve, but for him to be willing to move up into spots that are rather tight and still kick on with it, put it this way, his only problem right now is it seems like once he makes the front, he waits on somebody to come to him. Yes, that is a concern, but I think he can iron that out with a horse in time. I would rather at this point in time take Cyberknife than Taba if we're looking long-term.
I would agree. I mean, Taba looked absolutely finished turning in. I mean, I take your point that maybe some of it was he just doesn't want to be down inside of horses. And when he got outside, he continued to finish with alacrity. But, I mean, Cyberknife beat him on the square with, I think you could argue, a trickier trip. And I just don't like the way Taba travels. I mean, he's good. He's very, very good. But whether it's in his workouts or in his races itself, he's a horse who runs in spots, and it's going to be very hard to do that and think you can annex a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic. True or false?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I think it'd be hard to fully trust him. I suppose you can say the same thing about Cyberknife, just simply because he's not a completed project yet. But my thought is Taba still has a lot more learning to do compared to Cyberknife, who at this point, yes, he does have some learning to do, but for him to be willing to put himself into tough positions and still be able to persevere, I think that speaks volumes about his potential. I made the analogy that he reminds me of Authentic in that the mind has not caught up to the body just yet, but he is still producing grade one efforts. That's a dangerous combination going forward in a positive way. That if the mind catches up to the body, he's going to be a serious threat in any of these big races. And assuming they do continue on with the path they've mapped out to the Travers, I guess the audible would be the Pennsylvania Derby. He's a player in either one of those races. And if he moves forward from a number standpoint, here to 102 winning the Haskell, he's not miles behind some of the best. The older horses are still boss right now, but I could see an improved 3-year-old like Cyberknife continuing to jump up that buyer scale and making his presence felt.
If you were Al Gold's racing manager, Matt Bernier, what race would you suggest that they should point to next?
I would say the Travers simply because I want to find out truly his ability at 10 furlongs. Now, I personally don't have any doubts about it. He ran the final 8th faster than anyone else in the Haskell. I thought he looked good all around. I don't think that was a horse that was slowing down. We've talked about it, and I've stolen your phrase, an upline from a pace standpoint. According to Timeform US, both of his last 2 races have been uplines where he has run faster as the race has gone on. If you're doing that at a mile and an eighth, I think that bodes well. In races that you figure to get some pace, you're finishing. I think there's reason to believe this horse could be even better at 10 furlongs. And if that's the case, which again, I'd like to find out in the Travers, I think he could be a very intriguing prospect come the beginning of November at Keeneland.
Credit where credit is due. That's when I've swiped myself from the great Paul Matisse, the NHC champion professional player who makes his own figures. And I absolutely learned about that concept from him. And it does seem like Cyberknife is just ever improving. It'll be interesting. As a racing fan, I definitely want to see him go in what looks like it could be a loaded Travers. Maybe we have time for a quick word on the Jim Dandy before we get things done. Before we move on from the Haskell, though, Jack Christopher, I think the Occam's razor opinion, the simplest explanation is the best. The way he traveled through the race, the way it looked at the top of the lane, he looked like he was going to win by 3. I wrote a no finish on my trip note. It seems like he's meant to cut back. Is it as simple as that?
Yeah. Anyone that's drawing any other conclusions, I think, is a bit misguided. It's not that the horse is not talented. It's just that final 1/8 of a mile came back and finally bit him. The pedigree, we were waiting for it to show up, and it finally did. That doesn't mean that he's not going to be a major player in whatever one-turn race he continues on with. And I've seen some people bring up the 1-turn versus 2-turn argument. Oh, he didn't see out the trip. Well, he didn't see out the trip, but it wasn't the 2 turns that got him beat. He was in front at the top of the lane. He just didn't get that final 1/8 of a mile. I think if all things continue on this way, he's arguably the horse to beat in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile at Keeneland, going 2 turns. The talent is there. He just doesn't want to go that far.
Seems what I thought as well. As far as that goes, it was financially painful to me, and then I had the double whammy. I can't remember why. I think she liked the look of his chestnut coat or something. But Perrin picked Cyberknife. And of course, she was at the window with me, so she noticed that I bet about 40x on Jack Christopher on the fixed odds there at Monmouth Park, as she did on Cyberknife, and of course she won, and then says to me after, Daddy, you just should have bet it all on my horse. Like, yeah, thanks,
Pete, look,
thanks a lot, Parrot.
I'm going to echo the same thing though, because fixed odds, and I mentioned it on my pod at the beginning of the week. I got down at 2:17 Eastern on Cyberknife at 10-1. And he went off
phenomenal.
At 8. And again, if you're down there in Jersey, I think it's an absolute no-brainer. If you have any sort of ability to decipher odds and know who's likely to go off shorter than someone else or whatever it may be, and you can lock in value, do it in a heartbeat. It was a no-brainer at that point.
That's fantastic. I was bad. I did bet Jack Christopher on the tote and lock in the 4 to 5, but Perrin's bet was more of a last minute thing that I just threw on the tote. So we were stuck with those 7s. But I'll tell you what else, though. It's no longer, as of yesterday, Monmouth at Monmouth. Now, if you're in the state of New Jersey, you can sign up for a Monmouth Bets account and it doesn't even matter if you're a Jersey resident. If you're in the state, you can fund and bet on this stuff. It's only Monmouth product right now. That'll change over time. But yeah, check it out. They're obviously, full disclosure, they're sponsors. But I mean, I think Matt and I are both speaking 100%.
I'm purely looking at it, and you're right. They are sponsors. They're friends of ours. I'm looking at it from a gambling standpoint, a horse player's standpoint. The more options, the better. And when you have an opportunity, if you think that there is obvious value to lock it in and not even think about it as you get closer to post, it's a no-brainer.
Let's pivot to Saratoga on Saturday. We didn't really prep. Are you prepared to talk about both the Saratoga Stakes and both the Del Mar Stakes, or what have you looked at so far?
Okay. Both of them.
So let's start off with the Vanderbilt, right? So that's race number 8, goes at 4:50 Eastern on Saturday. Grade 1 action, a field of 6 going postward. I mean, David Aragona. So I had David on the show. I love this guy. So I had him on the show this week talking about 2-year-old races at Saratoga, evergreen conversation. Everybody should check it out. But what other morning line maker in the country has the whatever you want to call it to make Jackie's Warrior 1-5 on the morning line? I mean, he's right. That's the price. If you gave me 1-2, it would be bet of the year type stuff. He just lays over this field in the Vanderbilt, as far as I'm concerned.
See, and this isn't meant as a slight to David, but he's doing his job. It always blows my mind when there's a horse that is very clearly a 1-5 shot or a 2-5 shot, and on the morning line he's made even money. I go, in what world is he going to be even money? He's not going to be. So Jackie's Warrior, full marks to David. He's going to be 1-5. I can't imagine he's 1-9. I think 1-5 is spot on. He deserves to be 1-5. He's the fastest horse in the race. I don't care that he's carrying extra weight. I'm not a big weight guy in terms of horse racing, unless we're talking about, making it up the fall high weight when they're carrying 140 pounds at Aqueduct. But I mean, Jackie's Warrior, I think he is strictly the horse to beat. If you're looking to do something, if you're looking to play the race, granted, you probably lose all value in almost every pool, just simply because everyone's going to have him keyed on top. The horse that I would at least think about including underneath is a horse that admittedly I've had quite a bit of success with, but I think he's really good. I don't know that he's a superstar, but Willie Boy is in rock solid form. And I love his ability to run on the turns. Granted, it's been at Gulfstream Park, and we'll find out if that translates upstate at Saratoga. But I think each of his last 2 races have both been very good. Heck, I thought his run down at Tampa off the layoff was really good. But if you're looking to play something, Jackie's Warrior over Willie Boy, cold punch, exacta 4-2.
I will throw in, and you can accuse me of being a homer on this one, and you might not be wrong. But I do think that Knee Deep in Snow for our friends at 10 Strike Racing will be ridden to just make one run and try to pass horses late. And I think with that in mind, tactically, if the others decide to try to tangle in any way, shape, or form with Jackie's Warrior, I think he has a chance to pass him and round out that exacta. So, I mean, look, Jackie's Warrior, we'll see what the prices are when real prices come up. I mean, like I said, if you get 1-2, you bet out on the horse. If he is the 1-5 that David predicts, and he probably should be, I don't hate the idea of playing like a little 4 with 1-2 and hoping one of those 2 gets in there underneath for the exacta. Because I know Knee Deep in Snow has run closer to the lead, but I mean, these guys, we know them. They're sharp. They ain't going to lead. Ricardo, who won a race for them today, will be using hold-up tactics. And I think there's an opportunity he could come past them all, especially now that we have the it's interesting. It feels like the 6 is meant to be a rabbit in the race. I don't know if he's even fast enough to be a rabbit, but maybe anybody who risks getting into the teeth of that pace is also risking running last.
Pete, the only question is Jackie's Warrior 1-5 or 1-9? That's the only question. That's the only question in the race. Turn the page and move on.
Well, while we're talking about Saratoga, I think we should pivot and chat about the very next race, the Jim Dandy Grade 2 action. We've got the return to the races of some of the horses that, quote unquote famous horses from the Triple Crown. We've got Zandon, 3rd in the Kentucky Derby. Epicenter, who I'll argue was best in both the dubious distinction of being best in the Derby and the Preakness without winning either one of them. And we've got a Preakness winner early voting in there as well. Who do you think is going to win, Matt?
I like Epicenter. Early voting. I like early voting. I think it's one of those situations where on paper there's no speed other than early voting. I suppose Epicenter is the one that can go. I talked about it on my pod at the beginning of the week. Epicenter's in the darned if you do, darned if you don't position. If you don't go after early voting, he just walks on the front end, goes off, struts his stuff, and wins. If you go after him, you have to put him away and then hold off your uncoupled stablemate in Zandon or Tawnyport. It sounds like Western River is going to end up going in the Curlin on Friday. So this is going to be a 4-horse field. I think early voting is not only the pace setter, I think he's the best horse in the race. And I said it before, maybe I'm naive. I feel like he is still not getting the credit he deserves, even in Chad's own barn. Jack Christopher, we've answered the question. He doesn't want to go this far. But I still feel like people look at Zandon and think he's better. I think early voting is the best 3-year-old that Chad's got. I think with a forward move, he's a legitimate threat in a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic. He's shown that he can win on the lead or just off of it. He's stalked fast fractions and still finished. I don't know. Early voting looks like the complete package to me.
It's not crazy. I think Joel, especially after, to my mind, getting the worst of it in every way, shape, or form in the Preakness, is going to be glued to his hip. And I think they'll run it like a match race. And I think he just might be subtly a little bit better. The Derby trip we've talked about, I certainly don't blame Joel. That was a very difficult decision in that hot pace, being down inside. I think he just, got beat by the miracle run of Rich Strike. And then I just think the Pimlico trip was just a debacle. He doesn't break. He then has to check again. And then Joel decides to navigate him down to the rail. Look, I wish he'd gone forward, but then the rail wasn't the place to be there for me on that Saturday. We've seen a lot of horses come back who ran on the rail at Pimlico that Saturday. They've run significantly better figure-wise. I just think Epicenter might be a little bit better horse and be able to, if he breaks, just sit in his hip. They ride it like a match, and I think he might hold the cards. We'll see. I certainly respect your opinion, and if he doesn't break or Joel gets cute and they let him do his own thing on the lead, he's certainly the other one I want. I think it's a hard spot, really hard spot for Tawnyport and Zandon. I'll say that much. I think it's one of those top two, and the winner will come down to how the tactics play out.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I think Zandon's a good horse. Mile and an eighth is his trip. I think he's going to be pace compromised, and I think he's running against two horses that, in my mind, are better than him. One of them just happens to be going after the same trainer.
I also think, to the same point, let's say he runs a big race against the flow, I can still see Zandon being my Travers pick, depending on how it all shakes out. With the mile and a quarter. Oh my goodness, we have a violent storm ripping through here at the Brentwood, which probably means we're basically at the 7 furlong shoot. So there's probably a violent storm ripping through Saratoga right now. Just something like that.
The only other thing I would add, I will disagree. I wouldn't touch Zandon with a 10-foot pole at a mile and a quarter.
You just don't think he wants to go that far?
What's the excuse with the Kentucky Derby? He had every.
You're right. He's meant to go by Epicenter. He's meant to beat Epicenter.
Never mind not winning. You've got to finish second, and he didn't.
Right.
And
that's
unless,
a fair point.
I could be entirely wrong, but I think the Upstart came up and got him.
Yeah,
I think Upstart was a mile and a 16th, maybe mile and an eighth kind of horse. He's extremely talented. I just don't think he's a mile and a quarter type.
It's a completely reasonable opinion. Mine was more of a theoretical supposition that if he were to run well against the flow and if he has developed. But you're right. We do have empirical evidence that he doesn't want to go that far at this point. Let's pivot to the West Coast, Matt, and talk about the Bing Crosby Grade 1 action. Win and you're in action. We'll do that little gimmick where we reset here at the end and do a little 2-minute thing that maybe Breeders' Cup will send out on social. But this is a complicated enough race that I think we can do a more general discussion, and at the very end, we'll drill down for a minute or two as far as our final answers go. Give me your thoughts on this 10-runner field in general.
Fantastic race. There's no clear-cut standout in here. You can make a case, arguably, for the entire field in some fashion. I kind of looked at it and thought maybe this distance is a bit on the sharp side for him. But if you go back and watch the tape from that triple bend, I thought Principe Carlo did all the dirty work. He put away Brickyard Ride, and he just got nipped by American Theorem, who had the run of the race and just barely won the photo. I know this distance, he's only 1 for 7 at it. He's got a few runner-up finishes, but he likes Del Mar. I feel like if he runs that triple bend back, I think he wins. He can be forward enough that he's either on the lead or just off of it. And in a race that I would not take a short price on anyone because I just think it's that tough. I think it's that competitive. I'm going to go with Principe Carlo in here.
I like your confidence with that selection. I was a little bit interested in Bag Boss at the potential to move forward, trying Stakes Company for the first time. It is a big step up, but looked to me like one who could get the perfect stalk and pounce trip in this spot. What do you think of his chances?
Yeah, look, I thought he moved up very nicely last time out. He had paired up 90 buyers in the runs prior, moves up to a 94. The 9th and 11th place finishers were both next out winners with buyers of 91 and 85. So the form is holding up. And again, kind of the way you laid it out, he should work out a beautiful sort of stalking position, stalking trip, and be able to get the run. The question is he of this caliber? Again, this is a grade 1. I think probably in name only, probably closer to a grade 2 type of field. But boy, it's supremely competitive, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Brendan Walsh walks away with all the money.
The 3 and the 5, depending on which one of us you decide to listen to, in the Bing Crosby, a win and you're in race 4, the Breeders' Cup Sprint. While we're talking about Del Mar, let's move on to the San Diego, a race I know you have a lot of interest in talking about. 9 go to post in here. Who do you like to get the job done?
Yeah, a fabulous race. I mean, you've got so many of the biggest names in here. You've got Mandaloon. You've got Country Grammar coming back off the lengthy layoff. You've got sort of the horses that need to prove they belong in this group, whether it's Defunded or even a grade 1 winner like There Goes Harvard. This is probably the race I'm most looking forward to betting on Saturday. And no, the horse is not the likeliest winner by a long shot. Parnelli has paired up buyer tops of 93 in his last 2 starts. I think he's going to move forward here. He beat Extra Hope, who came back and earned a 90 in his next start. The 7th place finisher earned a 94 in his next start from a 77 earned in that optional claimer. The other thing with Parnelli is he dead heated with There Goes Harvard 2 starts back. There Goes Harvard then went on to win the Grade 1 Gold Cup out at Santa Anita, or the Hollywood Gold Cup, I guess technically it's called again. I think Parnelli is a prime example of a horse early on the connections thought highly of. They ran him in the Santa Anita Derby. They put blinkers on, draw a line through that race, draw a line through the synthetic race. Oh, as my camera goes out. Draw a line through the 2 turf starts. And I think you're looking at a horse that is very dirty and makes all the sense in the world at what should be at least 10 or 15 to 1. In a race where most of the competitors are prepping, I think Parnelli could steal this thing.
I love the case. It's very exciting. Much more interesting than me telling you that Country Grammar has the best form in the race. And I think Country Grammar, just based on the form that he's established and the figures that he's run, makes the most sense. But as you said it out loud, it resonated with me. Is there a potential that he's really just prepping a little bit short? He runs second, maybe to a longer price, like your Parnelli. What do you think about Country Grammar in here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Country Grammar is still one of the best horses as far as this division is concerned. I just feel like a mile and a 16th, this is nothing more than a means to an end to get ready for the mile and a quarter P Classic, where we'll get the showdown with Flightline. I don't know. I feel like this is nothing more than, get me to whatever the next spot is. Mandaloon, I'll tell you what, according to Timeform US, that Stephen Foster is going to be the race of all races as far as the Breeders' Cup Classic is concerned, because they have the top 5 horses in there running faster than anyone in this race is capable of. And if that's the case, I won't be surprised. But at the same time, I kind of want him to prove that he is of this caliber. And beyond that, I think there's a lot of other horses that need to prove that they actually can handle Del Mar. They can handle Better Company. There's so many different pieces in here. I just wanted to take a price.
Like the sound of it. Great stuff, Matt. Appreciate that. And if you're watching the late week show, we'll be back right after this. If you're watching Horseplayer Happy Hour, let's hit one more leaderboard, Matt, if you don't mind running it down, and we'll get out of here.
Yes, let me. I was trying to figure out why my camera just totally crapped out on me. But
yeah, I see. You're out of there. Well.
Yep. Yep. You've got the lightning symbol there. My phone is plugged in. Stuart Guthrie is still your leader at $50.50. Mark Henderson second, Dave Nichols third, James Lasowski's fourth. Tied for fifth is Michael Dominville and Togo Travaglia. Seventh is Tyler Sisk. Eighth, Ray Arsenault. Ninth, Frank Foss. 10th, Daniel Edwards. 11th, Mark Stovall. 12th, Muggsy Kreiser. 13th, again, Togo Travaglia. 14th, Robert Mack. And then tied for 15th, meaning 15th and 16th, Lee Van Winkle and Michael Domville again. So those are the 16 that right now would be qualifying for Saturday's contest. Again, the top 10 accumulate points to the Horseplayer Happy Hour Tour, and the top 2 will punch their ticket to the postseason, points notwithstanding.
All right, great stuff. We are done for today. Come join us next Thursday as well. We do this live stream from 4 to 5 every week. You can play along on horseplayers.com. We'll thank Matt Bernier. We'll thank our friends at the Brentwood, especially Marcus, for getting us sorted out here today. Really appreciate that. Our friends at the Breeders' Cup as well. Haley, Justin, especially doing so much to support us over here. We really appreciate them as well. Thanks most of all to all of you for listening and playing along with us. We really appreciate it. This show has been a production of the Breeders' Cup and In the Money Media. On the In the Money Media side, our business manager is Drew Coatney. Our chief creative officer is Jonathan Kinchin. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatell. May you win all your photos.